This is Tyler, and you are listening to the Analytive podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Curt Bear. Curt founded a company called Loco Think Tank in early 2014 after 15 years in banking. While in banking, Curt experienced peer advisory in his own life and decided that peer advisory was actually the ideal opportunity for personal and professional growth in business owners. LoCo, L-O-C-O, stands for Local Community. Loco Think Tanks put together groups of highly accomplished business people where they can learn from and help each other. I'm actually a member of one of these groups, and so far it has been incredible. This isn't a sponsored episode, but after meeting with Curt, I wanted to have him on the podcast to talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who want the best for you and for your business. I've experienced the benefit of this, and I think everybody should, even if you're not in an area where a Loco Think Tank exists. In this episode, we discuss Curt's successes and failures, why he left banking, what it's like running a small business, and how business owners should think about peer advisory, even if you're not part of a formal group. I loved having this conversation with Curt. Huge thank you for him to coming on the podcast. Enjoy our conversation with Curt Bear of Loco Think Tank. So good morning, Curt. Thank you so much for coming on the Analytive podcast. You're our first guest, actually, that I've had in person. So we are sitting in the same room having this conversation.
It's great to be here, Tyler. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm really excited. So we met, I actually reached out to you on LinkedIn because I was just sitting on my couch one evening. I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and I found Curt's profile and realized that pretty much everybody in the city of Fort Collins, where we're based, that I was connected with, you were also connected with. So I looked at your profile, started to go through and really try and understand, a little more about you, and then found out about the Loco Think Tank, which we'll get into a little bit later. But that was sort of my experience. We met for coffee then and really hit it off. And so I'm excited to have a conversation to you today about your background, which is super unique, and about networking and all that. So before we kind of jump into what you're up to now, can you fill in a little bit of background for me about your career trajectory? If somebody was looking at your LinkedIn profile, kind of what would they see? Who is Curt from a professional sense?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. And let's see. Economics background was my education, and I started college as an engineer, and calculus helped convince me that economics might be a better path. And got right into banking. Got into a banking training, credit and management training program, and just kind of moved my way through banking for most of a 15-year career, kind of promotions every other year or so, and more and more responsibilities, kind of culminating with a senior vice president, briefly acting president of a bank, and kind of senior commercial lender for a number of community bank organizations over the years.
Okay. And so how did you start? What was that trajectory every couple of years? I mean, were you a teller when you started and then moved up, or personal banker? What did that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question, to pull back the curtain on the banking industry a bit. Yeah. So the credit and management training program was with a company called Community First National Bank, and it was really intended to be a track toward leadership for young college graduates. So we did a lot of the jobs just so that we could experience them. But the track for my career was mostly consumer lending, and then into small business lending, and then into larger and larger business clients and more complex transactions related to commercial credit.
Gotcha. So You did that for 15 years.
Yep.
And then what changed then? Because then you got out of banking.
Yeah.
So talk about that transition a little bit.
Banking changed was one thing. Certainly the financial crisis was challenging, and the expense accounts were smaller, and the hours necessary to work per week to get all the stuff done, including more regulatory compliance and less staffing. Mm-hmm. So banking was just not as much fun as it had been. And the big tipping point for me was I did a lot of startup lending. And it was clear that I was never going to really be able to make bets with other people's money on which businesses would succeed and fail anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was really good at it. Yeah. And I felt like that was a shame that I wouldn't be able to use kind of my judgment to help influence a credit decision. But the world of banking had really been risk curtailed.
Right. So you were actually able to make loans to small businesses that were just getting off the ground
That's right. Yeah.
Prior. And then post 2008, then everybody, the credit kind of dried up.
It got a lot harder.
Yeah.
And then really probably the tipping point of the transition for me in a lot of ways was we did a rebrand effort, and I was asked to write a lot of the content for the website, the About Us, and why get your loans from this bank and stuff. And it really awoke a creative element within me that had been dormant for a long time. It was always one of my strengths in banking was my writing ability and ability to illustrate to the fellow members of the loan committees why this might look like a tough deal on the surface, but why these people were the right people to do it, why the industry was ready for this business, things like that. And so anyway, going through that marketing exercise really kind of opened my mind to, I told my Rotary Club members when I left, I just didn't want it to say on my tombstone, he was a pretty good banker for 35 years and then he died.
Yeah.
And so that kind of started the wanderlust.
Yeah. So then after banking, right, what was the next thing you got into?
I left banking. I started a banking consulting business called Bear Capital Advisors, and that business actually started Loco Think Tank as a DBA. That was my first business enterprise.
Okay.
Although Loco Think Tank was a sidebar at best at that time. But I started Bear Capital Advisors to kind of bide my time until I could get my restaurant figured out.
Okay.
And I had a local food restaurant concept, Bear's Backyard Bistro, kind of international fusion flavors of local food with a open to everybody community environment was the goal. And didn't get either of the locations that I had been scouting while I was still in banking and in discussions with landlords and things like that, and ended up scrambling to pull together a food trailer catering business to keep the dream alive.
Yeah.
The nightmare alive, as it turned out, kind of. But we started Bear's Backyard Grill as a mobile food trailer business, mostly focused on the catering market in June of 2014.
Okay.
So... yeah.
And so had this culinary desire always been something in your background, or how did you go from, these are two very different careers, right? So you were in banking,
right.
even though you were doing some...
And I'd seen plenty of restaurant failures.
Right. So you'd seen firsthand, right, what worked and what didn't. But then you decide, like, okay, I'm done with banking. It's not fun anymore, basically. Time to get out. And the first thing that you jump into is a restaurant, and then which turned into a food trailer. So where did that inspiration come from?
I suppose... I've been cooking really since I was like 11 years old for my siblings and such. Like when my mom was working a little bit, I would make meals and breakfasts and stuff all through college. I worked in a restaurant for 3 years in college, and I'm pretty good at it. I'm pretty inventive and creative with flavors, and I don't use recipes. I just use instincts and my tongue to taste it before I serve it usually.
Yeah, sure.
And so it was just something I was passionate about. I was really passionate about enhancing the sustainability of our local region. If the world goes to heck in a handbasket someday, we really have everything we need in a 100-mile radius. So just kind of developing that local food system, helping local farms to have a place to outlet their products, and helping bend our culture to want more local produce instead of honey from China and zucchini from Mexico and whatever.
Yeah, really focused on the local, experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost farm to table sort of.
Yeah, and it's better for the economy, spend those local dollars. And, if at some point our world has a lot of trade disruption and not to get into banking, but if when the dollar loses its global reserve status and oil trading ability, there's going to be hyperinflation just because of the reduction in demand for dollars.
Sure.
Our dollars will go very much less in terms of buying produce and food produced elsewhere, and so it's important for us to continue to develop that locally sourced food content. So I don't know if that's a year from now, 10 years from now, or what, but it will happen.
Yeah, eventually, right? Almost every currency has come and gone, right?
Right.
So it's only a matter of time. Like you said, whether it's 100 years or
right. I don't know, but anyway, that's why I was passionate about that particular area of food.
So the entrepreneurship and agriculture, is that something that you came through your family? Is that something that you are sort of unique and you've charted your own path? Like, where did kind of this interest in food, in farming, and entrepreneurship come from?
Well, I'm a farmer's son.
Okay.
First of all, and so our family's been blessed to really witness the American dream with regards to my dad's farm operation. He grew up in really poverty circumstances. We had free school lunch all through almost to the end of my high school. And my dad started a farm evenings and weekends when I was in first grade. And he's grown that farm to the point where he's not a wealthy guy, but he's wealthy enough to consider helping me support some of my ventures when we were talking about restaurants and things. So I've always been a farm kid. My backyard in Old Town Fort Collins is full of chickens and gardens, and that's just part of my DNA in a lot of respects.
Sure. Yeah, so he was getting into farming then at a time when many people were exiting farming. So was it just interest or drive? Like, do you remember what caused him to sort of decide that like farming was a good business to go into when so many people are getting out of it?
In our region where I grew up in North Dakota, farming is kind of the anchor of the entire economy.
Okay.
And so it's kind of always been a draw, I guess, to people because it is one of the only industries that really can thrive out there. And I think he's just got a desire for excellence. If everybody else was making 40 bushels to the acre on their crop and like 35 is the break even, right? We'll say he would get 50. So if they'd make $5 an acre on their farm, he'd make 15. And so he's just always reinvested in the farm. And just as he told a radio interviewer one time, I'll get maybe 50 chances at this farming thing. You get 1 year at a time. It's one cycle at a time. And so every time he's at bat, he swings for a home run.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in the restaurant and food truck business.
Yep.
And then so let's kind of fast forward to LoCo Think Tank.
Sure.
So we're actually in your office here in Fort Collins right now. So for people who don't know, what is LoCo Think Tank?
LoCo Think Tank is now a collection of peer advisory chapters where small business owners can receive a bit like a board of directors type experience for their small business. But the board members are fellow business owners. So there's a lot of common understanding, common challenges faced. We make it structured and cost-effective by finding a series of early retired, regular age retired, high-achieving business veterans, and those people take a role as a LoCo facilitator. So there's a professional facilitator at each chapter that manages one chapter of up to 12 members, and they really do a lot of the work. What LoCo Think Tank does is finds the members that are building businesses that are succeeding, and they're extremely talented, and they know a lot of things, but they don't know all the things yet.
Yeah.
And it's a really lonely place. And so LoCo Think Tank really exists to give a place for connection, for accountability, for encouragement, for perspective, for positive peer pressure, to do the things that you sometimes know you need to do, but you don't always want to do those hard things as a business owner.
Right. Yeah, because I just joined, right? So
Yeah.
I attended my first
Welcome.
meeting last week, I think. And yeah, it was an incredible experience just to get to sit in the room with other business owners, people who are dealing with many of the same challenges. They're in completely different industries,
Yep.
right? Everyone had a unique industry, but there was a CPA in the room. There's a company that makes high-end mountain bikes. There was a guy who runs a auto repair shop. I mean, a mortgage lender, like all kinds of different sort of people, but it's a lot of the same issues. It's understanding the balance sheet and profit and loss. It's staffing, and to actually be in the room and have those conversations with people. I'm really looking forward, basically, to digging in more and being a part of it. So
We're
I'm
excited to have you there.
Yeah, so I'm super, super excited. So then how did you so you were doing the capital advisors, you were doing the food truck thing. So then what was the spark, if you will, that really caused LoCo Think Tank? I mean, at what point did you sit down and say, like, this is a good business idea, let's launch with it?
Probably in June of 15, so roughly a year after I started the business, I took to my LoCo Think chapter the question, should I buy another food trailer? Because I'm working 70 hours a week on this one. I'm making like $2,000 a month in the summer and zero in the winter, negative in the winter. And, clearly I should probably scale up so that I can have enough revenues to get a little help and make this business work better. And so we went through our issue processing methodology on that question. Should Curt buy another food trailer and get it into operation this season? And we go through a clarifying questions before suggestions, and the questions were things like, how do you like making the same food over and over and over again? And how do you like always working when your friends have time? And then how do you like never having any time or money to benefit the causes and charities that you've always been a supporter of? And by way of asking those questions, they really helped to clarify to me that I was driving to not fail at the food business. That was my focus, if you will, and we get so focused on the thing sometimes. And they helped me to realize, you don't want to be where success on this path is going to take you.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting element to it. And in the end, they said, hey, Bear, what you need to do is actually park that food trailer in your backyard and go get a job.
Yep.
And get a job that's flexible enough that you can work on more Loco Think Tanks. Because I had started a second chapter by that time. Mm-hmm. And I think I made like $400 or $500 a month off of each chapter. So I couldn't really tell my wife, hey, baby, I'm just going to go full-time Loco Think Tank.
Right. You were nowhere near profitability yet.
Not close enough, yep. And so I went to work for a financial services company called Thrivent Financial, did a couple seasons with them, started another chapter, and then at the end really came to the conclusion that I couldn't indeed wear the two hats effectively. I looked at Thrivent as maybe a way to kind of monetize that network at Loco Think Tank that I'd been building. But truly, my members kind of saw through that and said, you don't want to be my financial advisor. You just want to be Loco Think Tank guy, and I think you should.
Right.
So they really helped me to see how to do that, and I had a number of members and mentors and things kind of help to strategic plan. Okay, how much revenue does this business need to offer a sustainable existence so that you can focus on it?
Very cool. Okay, so you knew you wanted to start the business, or you were already in the process. But talk about kind of the passion, how did you get to a point where you're like, Loco Think Tank is actually a good idea? Where was the initial, kind of even before the business, where was it born out of? When did you say like, oh, I need a group of people in my life to tell me what to do in my business effectively?
Good question. And a few different elements. Mostly this is kind of looking back on it that I can pull them out. But in my banking career, one thing that I observed was that of my most profitable and peaceful business owners, the ones that could just print me their financial statement the day after I asked for it and, figured out how to take nice trips and work 30-hour work weeks and, the American dream, right?
Right.
Most of them had some sort of peer advisory mechanism in their life. Whether it was, I was familiar with an organization called Vistage, which I had been a member of during my banking career, and several of my board members of the bank had. And so I was familiar with that, and it's a higher cost membership than what we offer. But then there's also a number of just what I call homebrew groups, where a group of individuals will kind of form up. Somebody will volunteer to be the organizer of it, and they'll meet once a month or every other week for a couple of hours and do the same general stuff. What I saw was really that a safe place for processing is just an incredible asset to the lonely chair of the small business owner.
For sure.
So I wanted that. When I was trying to start my restaurant, I wanted that when I was leaving banking. And the other elements to like what made LoCo different or how it was made to work was probably I had been a longtime Rotary Club member, and so I knew of this population of service above self kind of motivated individuals, which included a lot of retired small business owners. And then much earlier in my life, I had been a discussion leader for an organization called Bible Study Fellowship.
Okay.
And it was early after I became a Christian, and they asked me to become a discussion leader. And I said, oh, I can't. I don't know anything about the Bible. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, that's the point. You don't have to. You're just there to manage a good conversation. You're co-learning with the others. And so that's the offering that I make to our facilitators. Even though they're business veterans with a high record of achievement, they don't know all the things about succeeding in business today either necessarily. Mm-hmm. Things have changed. Things are always changing. And so we don't expect them to be the teachers. They're really just the minder. They're there to run an efficient meeting that gets the knowledge, that gets the learning, that gets the support and the connection established and builds relationships.
Sure. Gotcha. And so if somebody, is a place where they don't have something like a Loco Think Tank, right? You're somebody who's very connected in the community. Part of that's just being around for a long time. But for me, I guess networking, and again, I mean that as a positive word, not a dirty word, right? Actually adding value to people's lives, like having meaningful relationships, not just trying to get something from somebody.
Right.
But if somebody wants to start down that journey of networking, say they're young in their career, maybe early 20s, early 30s, and they're like, I just want to, make more connections in the community. There's somewhere where a Loco Think Tank doesn't exist. How would you start? I mean, how would you, what guidance or tips or tactics would you give someone to really start the networking journey in a healthy, beneficial way?
Okay. Yeah, good question. And I would point out that although Loco Think Tank does have a lot of networking elements, we're not about that. We're really more about focused on the business growth and the personal growth that is required. But in the general question of networking, find a community. As a banker, I had a boss that said you should be part of 3 communities, really. One that you're really involved in, one that you attend almost all the time, and one that, and I don't know if that's legit, but for me, Rotary Club has been one of my key networks of people, and it's a diverse community. I think just always being focused on what you can do to help other people achieve their dreams and succeed. And if you see those opportunities, and sometimes I drive myself crazy because I'll meet with somebody new, and after the meeting I'll be like, oh, I've got 4 introductions to make to kind of help this person on their journey, and I sometimes I do those bitterly because I've got too many things of my own to do. But I try to get them done because that is part of my function in the community. I feel like is seeing those connections that need to be made and kind of helping to empower those. So that would be one thing. In terms of like, hey, I'm a business owner. I want a safe place to process the challenges and opportunities that come across a business owner's place. You can do what we do on your own by assembling a peer advisory group, and we can even talk about, the primary service that Loco Think Tank offers. Anybody can use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is that? I mean,
it's what we call the Loco way for issue processing, and briefly, it's setting an issue on the table in the form of a question. It might be, should I hire an office manager? Should I fire my sales manager? Should I stop this line of business? Should I acquire this smaller competitor? Should I offer this junior staffer a partnership role? Whatever that looks like, we give our members a kind of a template to format that question, give it some background, some significance, identify some options. That member will put that issue on the table. All this is guided by the facilitator, but it doesn't have to be an outside facilitator. It can be just somebody who's in charge of running an orderly meeting.
Sure.
Once that question is on the table, then the group is allowed to offer clarifying questions, no suggestions. And that's usually a 15-minute period or so in our chapter meetings where you don't know the answer yet, you're still digging in, and you're really helping to understand what are the motivations, what are the emotions, what do I really want as the presenter of this question? And so those clarifying questions can often flush that out. Once those are fleshed out, then the group is allowed to make suggestions or offer solutions, rather. And it's most powerful when those solutions are, in my experience or when I saw this, instead of, I think you should that. Which is okay. Like that's the third most valuable thing. First-hand experience and second-hand experience being more useful. Once those suggestions are all out on the table from around the room, the presenter then gets to pick and choose which ones they really like. You can't do 12 suggestions before next month, but tell us the 3 or 4 things that were really resonated with you that you're going to do. Do you need any resources or connections to really empower that next step? Do you need to talk to this attorney or this financial person to help activate that plan? And then don't come back next month and tell us that you didn't do it because it was hard.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
This is business. It isn't easy, but we believe that you can do it.
And I got to see one of those firsthand. We had in our last meeting, which was the first meeting I attended, but somebody who had a personnel issue, right? A lot of ego on the personnel, and okay, I've tried to do X, I've tried to do Y, I've had conversations, now what? And It's just helpful because, and I think the thing is that I've seen in my limited experience is oftentimes we as business owners already kind of know what to do, but just having somebody reinforce that or to say, here is the solution. Like, yeah, you're maybe avoiding it because it's difficult, or you are, or occasionally you're way off base, and everyone else says, well, I think you should at least try these one or two things, and you're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that,
right?
And super valuable. So the issue processing, I mean, is that because there are a couple parts to a meeting. So I guess maybe high level, take me through what a Loco Think Tank meeting looks like. Right?
Sure.
For somebody who hasn't had a chance to get in one, what does the meeting look like?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. The first 40 minutes or so is typically a check-in, and that'll be a 3 or 4 minutes from each member. We say we're 2 parts business, 1 part personal, and so we do a business and personal check-in at our meetings. So that's really just to check in with everybody. Here's what's going on. My daughter that broke her arm is doing great last month, or whatever is going on in your life, in your business, bring us up to speed. From there, we typically move into a focus member presentation, and that's going to be a 30-minute pulling back the curtain of my business. Here's my org chart. Here's my financials. Here's my strategic initiatives, 1, 3, 5 years. We have kind of a template that's offered to kind of help guide people through that, but it can be added to and modified, whatever it's going to take to help the fellow members understand your business at a deeper level. From there, we offer one of those questions, the issue processing, that focus member does. So, okay, now that you know more about my business, is it time to fire my sales manager? Or whatever that question might happen to be, go through that issue processing. Typically, there's a couple more at-large issue processings so that you're not waiting for your once-a-year chance to be the focus member. We do cap the membership at 12, but that's part of the facilitator's job is really to identify who's got a hot issue this month, or at the May meeting, somebody may raise their hand and say, hey, I've got this issue coming up. Can I take one of the at-large slots for June? That kind of thing. So we kind of disperse that microphone, and the fellow members also learn from the processing of each other's issues. The balance of the meeting is kind of any combination as necessary of prospect vetting and introductions. It might be outside speakers. Sometimes we scrap one of the at-large issue processings to have more time for a topical speaker. We also will have goal check-ins, progress reports on things. A lot of times we have a giveaway, takeaway section where we either give something to the group that we've discovered. Hey, you got to use this new program or listen to this podcast episode or whatever.
Sure. Or
something that we're taking away from the meeting that might, Bob got something from Susie's issue processing, and he's like, hey, I really learned something there. Thanks for that. And so that's kind of the bulk of the meeting.
Yeah. And it was neat because when I saw the issue processing happen, there were 2 or 3 people in the room that were like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with a similar issue, right? I got a personnel issue that I'm trying to solve, and the feedback that was given was extremely helpful. So there's also value there. It's not just, oh, here's your solution for your particular problem, but it's listening to the conversation, being in the room with smart, successful people, right? And you sort of collect advice almost by osmosis.
Right, yeah. Sometimes you're like, oh, I had a problem with that. I didn't even know I had that problem, but I better go fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, it was a neat experience, and I love LoCo Think Tank, and if you're in an area, I mean, find a group like this, because this year for me, I realized that I wanted to get more connected, and I've been running the business basically solo. I consume a lot of content, from entrepreneurs, and listen to a lot of podcasts and videos and all that, but it wasn't specific advice, and it wasn't necessarily people who know and understand your business, right? And so I think there's value in both, right? I wouldn't say that you should only do this. Yeah, you should read books and learn from the best, but also having people in your community that know your unique situation, your unique skill sets. One of the things that also impressed me was just how, I guess, vulnerable people could be sometimes, in a group like this. So how do you foster vulnerability in a room full of people who are typically very, competitive, right? Business owners tend to be competitive. They tend to be, sometimes type A's or success driven. So how do you kind of break down those walls and help people be vulnerable in that situation?
I don't know. I love it. And I think part of it is me. When there's a sad situation or a happy situation or whatever, I'm like an insta crier these days. and I'm a big hairy guy, right? And so me being vulnerable and transparent in those meetings, but I'm not in all the meetings. I would say part of it goes down to our values from the get-go. You know, we have a number of values. One is we encourage and admonish with loving kindness. You know, it's a nice people's club, and so that's part of the kind of vetting process is, does this person feel safe? One of the nice things for our members is that oftentimes I'm one of the only connecting factors from everybody. When I launch a chapter, many of them are meeting each other for the first time. And it's almost easier to be transparent and vulnerable with a stranger-ish that you're not running into every week at church or whatever, rather than somebody that you're interacting with all the time. So I wish I think it's just setting the example, and over time the culture has just really kind of developed that this is a safe place.
And I think at the beginning, so we did, and maybe you do this in all the meetings, when you talk about the personal and professional check-in, right? So you go up and you write on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I at in my business, right? 10 being, oh my gosh, this is the best
Crushing it.
week, month I've ever had. 1 is like, my business is going bankrupt, you know? So where are you sort of in the middle of that? And then the personal side too, it's like, and people, I think, as entrepreneurs, it is lonely, and so you get to share like, oh, well, this is happening in my life. Or as you said, my daughter broke her arm, or, it's been tough because X happened or Y happened, so there's that built-in vulnerability. And I think you're right in that, not having, connections, right? There's no clients, there's no customers necessarily in there. It's not a place where you have to put on a front and act like you have everything together, like you do in 90+% of your other time as a business owner, right?
Fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there's just a lot of opportunity for vulnerability there.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so I was a huge fan. So so for somebody who is in a position where they maybe want to start one of these groups, not even as a business, but just they're like, man, this sounds amazing. Like, but I live in North Dakota or wherever, right? There's no Loco Think Tank or anything around. How would you kind of start the first group, or maybe how did you start the first group of getting the first 7 to 10 people on board?
That's a really good question. For me, it was relatively easier on the first group because I had a former Vistage chair that was out of her non-compete agreement timeline. And so she was kind of that building block I built around in some extent was, hey, this is a person that already has been trained deeply in facilitation, has experience. We want her. Sign me up. And I really, I was a banker, so I knew a lot of small business operators, and I just kind of grabbed 8 or 10 of my favorite smartest of those and invited them into this community. If somebody was in North Dakota or wherever, we're just in Fort Collins, Levelland right now with aspirations to grow regionally here in the Front Range in the next year or 2, 3, whatever. But it'll be a while before we're in North Dakota. Sorry. Sure. But I would say, if you feel like you have a fairly comprehensive background in business already, that would be, you could be the facilitator, be the organizer. If you don't feel like you have that, then find somebody that maybe does, that could act as that moderator of the meetings, that you could perhaps be the recruiter, the gatherer. And then it's really, knocking on doors. What I really do a lot of, Tyler, is when I am doing business around town with whatever sort, whether I'm getting my car fixed or having a smoothie at the coffee shop or whatever, if I have a really excellent experience and I meet staff members that are really loving being there, and I maybe I meet an owner that seems like they really have a great passion for their business, that's one of my first clues. That person might be open to that they're driven, they're growing. When you see businesses that are growing, that's a good clue that people are stretching themselves in order to become a bigger leader, a better leader, that kind of stuff. So that, and then, I would say just get a diversity of people. If you're a 50-year-old white guy with a small business and you round up 8 more 50-year-old white guys with small businesses, the diversity of perspective that you're going to get in the room is not going to be the same as if you can both be intentional with gender. We're about 35% female, which we're happy about, but also with personality type, and you're looking for couple people maybe that are really good at financials and the money management stuff, and a couple people that are gifted marketing strategists and people for their own business or as a company. Looking for visionaries and engineers, but not too many of either, because it's either be too boring or too off the tracks.
Sure.
Right, and so just kind of trying to find that intentional diversity. We've got like 30 taglines, but one of them is our diversity is our strength. And I think that's valid. Like, we just don't. One brain is only so capable, and 3 very similar brains of similar people isn't that much more. But if you get 10 dissimilar brains of 10 dissimilar people all examining one challenge, it can be really super powerful.
Yeah. And it is neat to have, because I work in marketing, that's my bread and butter. It's what I spend all my time. And so I look at everything through a very unique perspective, which at times is valuable, but at times is also siloed.
Right.
And so like if somebody has a business problem and their business isn't growing, I can see exactly what needs to be done there, but I might miss something on the financial statements, or I don't see maybe the personnel issues the same way that someone with that kind of experience would. And, and having that diversity of lenses, if you will, to just how the people see the world, is really powerful.
Yep, that's I think that's the most important thing, kind of, is having some of that diversity in the room.
Yeah. So, what's your big ambition with LoCo Think Tank? I mean, 5 years, 10 years, like where will LoCo Think Tank be? Where would you like it to be? Where would you like to be?
Sure.
In the future.
The big. Is that LoCo Think Tank is an abundance mindset seeding organization. We bring an abundance mindset to it. It's not about winning. It's about traveling your journey and being your best self and bringing what you have and freely offering it to the group. And so my hope is that we can, wherever there are retired, early retired, high-achieving small business veterans, that LoCo Think Tank can get really good at empowering them to establish a chapter in their area. And we'll take all the heavy lifting off. We'll do the billing, we'll do the website, the newsletter, the outreach, marketing events, things like that. And they can just settle in for this really enjoyable yoke job of 20 hours a month of hanging out with entrepreneurs and helping them find their path.
Yeah.
So that, but that's the big dream. That's seeding communities, through these small business owners and the employees and the people that they touch, like trying to help uplift abundance mentality throughout our nation and our world. That's the big.
Sure.
But the 3-year plan, we'll say, would be to hope to have 20 to 35 chapters around Colorado, and maybe a couple of outpost chapters that, as we test kind of how to grow geographically and get, frankly, enough revenues and cash flow that we could support a marketing effort into other states and other regions. We're 6 chapters strong right now in Fort Collins, Loveland, growing to 8 next month, and we hope to 10 by the fall. And so we're getting our momentum is pretty good. We're getting our systems and processes and our marketing systems figured out a little bit, but we've got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So far, most of the chapters have been built one-on-one, I say grappling and tackling.
Sure.
I find somebody I find interesting, share what we do, get them a headlock, and bring them into a chapter meeting. And then once they're there, they're like, oh, this is actually really neat.
Yeah.
You were a different type. You were more willing than many.
Well, I think I saw the opportunity and I saw the value of it, and it was something I was willing to jump into and try. So are you looking for a facilitator? So if somebody's in, whether they're, regional here in Colorado or even across the country, I mean, are you looking for people to work with, more like a franchise, or are you just sort of growing a little bit more slowly, very methodically right now?
Yes. Yes to both.
Okay.
I would say we are actively looking for abundance mindset, give back mentality, purpose-driven business veterans in Colorado that might enjoy this role. We have a page on our website just for what's the LoCo experience look like from a facilitator's perspective. And so the answer to that is yes. We're not going to try to grow too fast because we're not... we're aware that we don't really have that part of it figured out yet, is how to empower, a group to just kind of spring out of the community in these other markets of Boulder and Denver and places where I have almost no connections.
Sure.
And so we're figuring that out a little bit at a time, and I've added a new staffer here recently that's really proving to be helpful in figuring out that challenge. Honestly, my marketing isn't my strength. It's relationships and connectivity. And so I trying to add that element to the business because it's going to be tough to grow geographically if we can't market successfully.
For sure. So what's the benefit to a facilitator then? I mean, somebody who is maybe retired or partially retired,
Sure.
says, hey, I mean, being a facilitator sounds great. What's the benefit?
What's the draw?
Yeah, to someone like that.
Many things. One, it's a paid role. You're a subcontractor, and for our thinker chapters, which is kind of our most popular chapters right now, that's the members of kind of 5 to 35 employee businesses. They can make up to $1,200 a month if they have a full chapter. As a subcontractor, 1099 employee, that's not why they do it. Most of them would do it almost for free. But being paid for your time after you've kind of given up being paid for your time is actually a really rewarding experience for them. And so we try to compensate them reasonably for their time.
Sure.
We wouldn't be able to have affordable membership if we paid them what they were really worth, but that's great. That's part of the whole vision of that give back mindset. The big benefit is just a double dose or a triple dose of purpose. A lot of times business leaders, once they hang up their skates, so to speak, feel really a want of what is my purpose in the world now? Yeah, I'm a grandpa or a grandma. I'm a golfer. I water ski. But what is my purpose really? And especially as long and as healthy as people are living now, if somebody's 65 years old and retired or 70 years old and retired, they might have 20 more great, capable brain years left.
Yeah.
So that purpose, they get to keep learning. They get to be in a room with a dozen growth-oriented, really sharp young people that are trying to build their businesses once a month and between meetings. And so that's a huge blessing if your other adult interaction is just, bridge night.
Sure. So
nothing against bridge, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So LoCo, what does LoCo stand for?
LoCo, local community
Okay.
think tanks, and or make you crazy if you don't talk to somebody about your small business challenges, or make your spouse crazy if you ask them one more time what you should do next.
Right.
So none of those other taglines were a part of it, but it was going to be NoCo Think Tank.
Right,
and
Northern
you'd be
Colorado,
shocked.
yeah.
You'd be shocked how many times people call it NoCo Think Tank, even though it's got a big old L on the front of it. But the thought of geographic opportunity occurred to me kind of right as I was registering the trade name. And I'm glad I did. I think LoCo Think Tank is a much nicer name.
Yeah.
And so that's where it came
for the
from.
future, right? I mean, NoCo, people know Northern Colorado where we are, but you
Right.
have bigger ambitions for this than just, 8 or 10 in the Fort Collins, Loveland, Front Range area. I mean, and the fact is there's business owners all over the country.
Right.
In lots of different cities, and they can benefit for something like this, or from something like this.
I think so, yeah.
For sure. So if people want to connect with you online, where's the best place to do that? How do they get in touch with you? Either website, email, Instagram, whatever you want to give out.
Sure. I'll give out whatever they want. Our website is the main place for information on LoCo Think Tank. That's just LoCo thinktank.com. You can check out my Instagram. It's mostly just food pics and pictures of my dog. And I'm Loco NoCo Bear.
Okay.
And but there won't be anything about LoCo Think Tank on there.
Gotcha.
We've of course got a Facebook page. My LinkedIn bio, just Curt Bear. There can't be very many of them. CurtBear has a bit of the story of the background and what I've done along my career and stuff. It's not that exciting, but you can check it out.
Cool. Well, Curt, thanks a ton. I really appreciated hearing about LoCo Think Tank. I learned a lot, even though we've chatted a little bit in the past.
Awesome.
And I wish you the very, very best. And if you're in the Northern Colorado area, Loveland, Fort Collins, even Denver, Colorado Springs, and you're interested, reach out to Curt. There might be some opportunity for you.
Yeah, looking for facilitators, always.
Yeah. Curt, thanks a ton.
Thanks, Tyler. See ya.